Welcome and thanks for tuning in. I'm Lynn Berger, host of Lynn Berger Interviews Remarkable People. And today I have the privilege of speaking with Alexbores, Assemblyman of the 73rd District in New York. Alex, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Lynn.
It's a privilege and an honor. So take me back to your earlier years. Did you know what you wanted to do?
No, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to be, but I think there was always some piece of me that wanted to have an impact. And I think early on I found that government, whether that was electoral politics or not, was a later conversation, but government as a way of having an impact stood out to me.
Now, where did that come from?
A few places. I mean, as someone who grew up in New York City, for me in particular, I remember 9/11 when I was in 5th grade, and that being a sudden realization of the impact that government policy can have, as we learned more in the years after about any intelligence or preventative measures before, and then how our policy has impacted things afterwards. It's impossible to be a New Yorker from that time and not have that awareness. But it's also the smaller local decisions. It's how we use our streets. It's whether the garbage gets picked up. It's these minor aspects that aren't what make the national news, but affect people's quality of life and day-to-day interactions. And so the ability to have an impact in New York State on 20 million people, and to, if you change a law, you change the incentives, that just keeps on helping people. The power of that is something that always stuck out to me.
Now, did this come from your family or?
My family's never been in government in any way. Both my parents were actually in TV. My mom was a writer-producer for ABC News for most of her career, and then NBC News, and my dad's a technical director at ABC, but both were very involved in their unions. My dad's actually president of his local now, and so government, no, but organizing with people, yes, right? The power of coming together and as speaking with one voice and organizing a movement as a way of making change. I was introduced to that very young. I often say, though I loved all the schools I went to, right? I went to PS6 and Wagner and Hunter High School growing up and got a wonderful education there. The best education I ever got was actually on the picket line with my dad when I was 8 years old, and he and his union were locked out for fighting for better health care. And it was in seeing them all come together and fight for that health care and fight for better working conditions that I understood the power of collective action.
Well, it had an impact on you, and we're all so lucky for it.
Thank you.
So take me back so you were educated in New York, and then after high school, you went to college,
Yes.
and then what happened?
So I went to Cornell. I studied labor relations, actually. I was in the Industrial and Labor Relations School, and I was involved in activism up there as well. We organized a campaign to get Nike to pay legally mandated severance pay to workers who had been laid off, and were successful in actually changing Nike's behavior in doing that. And so it was this continued push on the power of working together with people. And so after college, I originally actually wanted to be a lawyer coming out of college, but every lawyer I spoke to told me not to be a lawyer, or at least take time off in between, make sure that's what I wanted to do. So I went to this economic litigation consulting firm, and I found I really enjoyed playing with data. I really enjoyed the economic modeling. I really did not enjoy the billable hour, and I didn't enjoy the doc review, and I didn't enjoy that it was litigation based, which meant it was zero sum and backwards looking. And so I realized everything that I like about this job I don't get to do as a lawyer, and everything I don't like about this job is exactly what I would do as a lawyer. And so that was a sign, hey, maybe I should lean into this budding technology interest and grow my skills there and see how I can help people with that.
And you went far with that for a while.
I did. So from there I went to a company called Palantir, which worked with the federal government to make it more effective and efficient. I helped the Department of Justice find opioid pill mills and shut them down to fight the opioid epidemic. I worked with the CDC on spotting epidemics quicker. I worked with Veterans Affairs on better staffing their hospitals, and with the Census Bureau on getting a better estimate of GDP. And all of these instances were things where there weren't deep policy disagreements, but there was a capacity in government question. And I was able to bring technology to make that more efficient. While working there, I actually started a master's program in computer science because I thought, well, I'm working in this and I'm working with people that have that real academic background. I should make sure I have it too. And then from there, worked in a couple of startups, including ones that worked with local government, which I'm happy to talk more about. But after that, when I ran for election, because of that degree in computer science, it actually made me the first Democrat elected in New York at any level with a degree in computer science.
Right. And what made you want to go into government? What spurred that after your startup experiences?
Well, government had always been there, right? Because the startups were working with government. But the question was, so often I was fixing bad policy downstream with technology. And this was an opportunity to go upstream and actually have the right policies in the first place. And the question for me was always, where could I have the greatest impact? Where could I help people the most? And I actually made it a point of reaching out to a number of current and former assembly members when I was making the decision as to whether I was going to run. And I got connected with Ali Capel, former assembly member from the Bronx, who was also New York's Attorney General and a city council member who worked in a number of different roles. And he passed over 200 laws, I want to say, while he was in the assembly. But he told me that there's 3 bills he's particularly proud of. He has printed out in his desk drawer to this day, and when he's having a bad day, he takes them out and he reads them and just reminds himself that he did something. And that ability to look back and say, hey, I did something that impacted 20 million lives, that made a difference, that was too tempting to pass up.
Okay, you answered my next question. So we'll move on from there. But so let's go back to this first Democrat elected with a computer science degree. It's hard to believe because of the year 2024, yet how has that affected your work, and the value you're able to bring is enormous.
The beauty of any legislature is bringing people together with a lot of different perspectives.
Right.
Now, most legislatures have a disproportionate view from some perspectives, right? And to be the only person, or thankfully now there's a couple others, one of very few that have that academic background in computer science, as well as my career working in government technology, means that maybe I can spot things that need to be improved, or spot aspects of bills that might get in the way of the ultimate goal. So too often I find elected officials focus on just getting a bill passed, and that makes sense. There's a lot of work to get a bill passed, and that's what people celebrate. But if you just stop paying attention once the bill's passed, most citizens experience the actual implementation, the actual execution of the bill. And too frequently we don't think about what that'll look like. And I've had conversations with colleagues where they have a really well-intentioned bill, and I'm able to say, hey, this provision in there is going to make it nearly impossible to execute, right? So if you take that out, right, you'll serve your goal better. Or if you put this in, that'll change it. And so sometimes I'm able to help colleagues as they pass those bills. Other times it's finding places that need improvement that maybe wouldn't be obvious to others. So I remember when I was working at Palantir, we could do things a lot faster if we were allowed to work in the cloud. And there's secure versions of that, and I could go really in depth if we want, versus having to install a new physical mainframe. And sometimes you still want the physical one, right? But often the cloud is faster. And it turns out New York State didn't really have a unified policy around when to go to the cloud and when to do things on new hardware. And so decisions were sort of made as they came up, which is not as strategic, and it means slower government service for you and me. It means it's harder to get it through to a website, harder to get the service you need. So one of the bills I passed this year was, not anyone's first idea of what needs to be passed, but making it so that agencies have to have a written plan on when they go to the cloud that they're thinking about ahead of time.
Good.
And ideally that means faster government service, and it also means more efficient, and we can save money in doing that as well.
What did they do without you?
Well, New York's existed far beyond me and will exist far after.
However,
you know, but, yeah.
it's fundamental.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
So let's go to the hot topic now, AI.
Yeah.
Everyone is going to be affected by this. And I know you've done a lot with this and you have a lot of knowledge to share. So tell us how it affects and how you see it affecting government and how we should use it properly.
We could talk about this for hours. I think there's a few fundamental things everyone should understand about this technology. AI, that broad concept, has been around with us for a while. What's really new and different is this generative AI, the ability for AI to create things. And there's debate over exactly what's created versus reproducing others, but speaking broadly, to create things that generally you would need a human for in the past, whether that's the written word, as we often think about, or that's video or images or sound. And that comes with incredible threats and also incredible benefits. And so the role of government is going to be to set the rules of the road to protect us from some of those threats.
I hope so.
Two of the bills that were added to the budget this year were bills that I was carrying in the Assembly to protect elections from AI interference.
Absolutely.
To require disclosure if you're using generative AI, and also to allow courts to take down deep fakes if they're made of a candidate very close to the election.
Well, you hope you find them, right?
Well, if no one finds them, then they're not affecting the election much, hopefully.
No, well,
but
some
yeah.
people.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a really good point, is that it used to be that everything was, broadcast TV, but even before that it would be in online where anyone could see it. And now that you have WhatsApp groups or Telegram groups, right, you can have a deepfake going around that very few people outside the group know is happening and can influence a large number of people. But, there's a lot of downside risk, but there's also a lot of upside. There's, I'm sure everyone's had the experience of trying to call into a government agency and being put on a, 3-hour wait.
I think we all have. Yes.
And there will always be the need for humans to answer those calls, the really complex ones, the queries. But are there more things that AI can handle the easy cases so that those can be taken off the queue and people can be helped faster, and you can have humans working on the really difficult ones? Can you help sign people up for benefits faster? It's not just a threat or just a benefit. We're going to be looking at both.
Well, there's a lot of gray in there.
Totally.
Right?
Totally.
And it has to be used properly so we can get the best benefit out of it. But it is new terrain. Absolutely.
And it's new every day, right? If there's one thing to remember about AI, it's how quickly this technology is going to develop and change. And that's both because of the incredible investment and capital that's being put into that research, but also because it can help to speed up itself. And for any sci-fi fans out there, I'm not talking about the singularity, right? It's not coding itself just yet. But one of the things that generative AI is best at is helping with coding. And it's speeding up the research into new forms of AI. Also, you have NVIDIA that makes the chips, that are the actual computer chips that most AI runs on. About a year ago, took all of their corporate knowledge, all of their bug reports, all of their schematics, all of their customer interactions, put it into an AI to try to design new chips for AI. And so AI is speeding up the development of AI. If you're fighting the battles of today, or worse, of 5 years ago, you're way behind. We need to be thinking about, especially at the speed of legislation, what's going to be needed next year or in 5 years or in 10 years.
The future is here,
right? Yes, very much so.
Very quickly. I know you've been working really hard and you accomplished quite a bit.
Thank you.
Let's, well, first I'll ask you, what are you most proud of that you've been able to accomplish to date?
There's a few things. There's things that, are sort of behind the scenes, and maybe they don't impact a huge amount of people, but I know how hard it was to get a certain thing in the right space. But in terms of an impact, The bill that I'm proudest of is my judge's amendment. So one of the things that I've been talking about since coming into office is that trials in New York take way too long. Criminal trials, civil trials, and this benefits no one. And there's many reasons for the delay, but one of the silliest is that we just don't have enough judges. And so last year I passed a bill that created 20 new judges throughout New York State, but I couldn't create any new state supreme judges, the relevant level. Couldn't create any new state supremes in Manhattan, the Bronx, or Staten Island because there is a limit in the New York State Constitution on the total number of judges per population that you can have in a jurisdiction, and Manhattan's been at the limit for decades, and the Bronx and Staten Island are now there or close, and actually the capital region around Albany is also at its limit, and this is just an anachronism from 1846.
It's 2024,
that
right?
needs to be overturned.
Right,
And so amendments take a long time. They have to pass the legislature twice and then put out to voters for a vote. But this session, we were able to pass it for the first time. And so my hope is we'll be able to pass it in 2025. And then to all of you at home, we'll need your vote in 2026 to actually make this amendment.
Well, I know you worked really hard at that.
Thank you.
So thank you. Now, there's a couple of other things you've been doing also you want to share with us. I'll let you choose, and then I'll go to some.
Sure.
Yeah.
We already talked about the AI election stuff, which
yeah,
was a big
yeah.
push of mine this year. Another issue that comes up all of the time is street safety and e-bikes and mopeds and the whole micro-mobility changes. There's a lot that we have to do there. Last year in this off session, right, when we're not going up to Albany as frequently, I took the time to really dig into the data for what is happening on the streets. And I tried to ask, how many collisions or injuries or deaths are caused by an e-bike or a moped? And the answer was no one knew. And part of the reason for that is because the standard form for reporting collisions didn't have a box for e-bikes or for mopeds. It was based on when it was just bicycles or motorcycles. And so we did this full report, and we found that, and we standardized on the number of vehicles that exist. So not surprisingly, cars are still the most dangerous vehicle on the road, but e-bikes are closer to cars than they are to normal bicycles. An e-bike is 19 times more likely to cause a death in New York City than a normal bicycle. And so we knew we had to take action. There were two bills in particular that the report called for that we were able to pass this year. One was changing that data so that we actually got reporting on collisions and crashes. As the New York Senator, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, was fond of saying, you're entitled to your own opinions, but not to your own facts. This was my ode to him of let's all start with the same facts. And that also requires an investigation anytime someone is seriously injured or killed with an e-bike. And then the second bill was looking at mopeds, which were already required to be registered and insured and have a license plate, and you need a driver's license, all of the above, but almost never were. So when we wrote this report, we looked up how many mopeds were registered in New York City, and there were less than 5,000.
And we know
there are more. I don't know how many there are, but I know NYPD seized over 13,000 last year alone. And so new bill that I was able to get passed this year requires mopeds to be registered at the store. Before you leave the store, you have to register, which is the same way legally we treat ATVs, and not legally, but practically the way we treat cars. People don't drive off the lot and then go get their tags. You just handle it right there. And so we'll now treat mopeds the same way, which allows us to have a little bit more enforcement and tracking and make the streets a little bit safer.
Well, let's talk about the reservations legislation.
Sure, yeah. So this came together very quickly. Normally legislation takes a while to pass, but it was a problem in New York and one that was growing. And so the fact that we were able to nip it in the bud was really important.
Right.
But basically, this third-party marketplaces had sprung up that allowed people to sell reservations to restaurants. And you might think, okay, that's a good thing that someone who's not going to use a reservation can pass it to someone else. But once the marketplace is set up, it becomes an encouragement for people to book reservations for the sole purpose of selling them. They're not intending to ever go there. And so you had people, some in New York State, some outside of New York State, coding up bots to make reservations with the second they open to just get every reservation at a restaurant, or calling and faking their voice in order to make reservations. And then once they had them, they'd go to these websites and sell them for, $50, $100, $500, even over $1,000.
Crazy amounts of
just
money.
for the reservation. That doesn't cover the cost of the meal.
Only in New York.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly mostly in New York. I think there's and so this was just getting in the way of, families that wanted to go do a special meal to celebrate, right? The big shots that always go all the time, they were paying, that was fine. But let's say you want to splurge for a graduation or an anniversary, right? You didn't have that option anymore. You had to pay double what you were expecting to. It was hurting the restaurants because they were seeing increases in cancellations. Cancellations are about 10%, 11% nationwide. In New York City, they rose to nearly 20%. And that hurts the workers. Even if the restaurant puts in a deposit, workers don't get tipped if the table's not used. And so everyone was suffering, or at least all New Yorkers were suffering, while this marketplace was glomming on top and trying to extract money. And so we passed a bill that said you can't sell reservations without having some agreement with the restaurant. You can't be this third party that comes in and just decides, okay, yeah, we're going to book everything and then sell it for a personal profit. That's no longer allowed. We were able to get that through with really large majorities in both the Assembly and the Senate, and that, again, wait to the governor's desk for signing.
Okay. Well, when you hear about it, it's startling.
Absolutely.
The price people were paying.
And it was growing. It started in the few restaurants that were real hotspots that no one could get a table at, but then once you have a bunch of people making those reservations, it makes the problem worse and worse. So I'm very glad we're able to
nip that.
Exactly. Anything
else you want to speak about before I kind of go on to another topic?
I would just say this is a local one, but the Knickerbocker Grays are a local institution based in my district that have been at the Park Avenue Armory for 100 years, 120 years. And during COVID, the conservancy that runs the armory decided, let's take advantage of this and sort of move them out, and really got the community up in arms because it's a state-owned building. I was able to work with our state senator, Liz Krueger, and pass a bill this year that would enable the Grays to stay in the armory. That's not a statewide thing. That's a local concern. I mean, it would apply to all armories, but it was really motivated by the Grays. I'm pretty proud of being able to deliver that one.
Well, that's terrific.
Thank you.
And we can count on you for more.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, as you look at your career, thinking, how would you advise a young person, or not even young, an individual that maybe wants to make a transition into government, what advice would you give them?
Get involved, start volunteering, get close. I mean, that can be on the campaign side, which is how I started, but that can also be just helping with an office. I mean, we always have more work than we can do, even with, we're lucky in New York to actually have legislative staff, but we're constantly doing more research on bills. If there's something that you notice that could be fixed, it doesn't have to be the most important issue, right? But if it matters to you, if it's something you care about, write your elected official, and don't just say, hey, please do something about it. I mean, I like those emails too. I think ideas. But if you're like, hey, I think we should do this, I think this is the solution, I could go talk to these people and get them involved, that's incredible. I mean, we would love citizens proposing bills, getting engaged, proposing initiatives. So I would say, you don't have to give up what you're doing cold turkey and start in government. Dip your toes in. Volunteer in campaigns, volunteer in offices, go to your community board meeting, go to your local Democratic club or Republican club and engage there. People are desperate for good, smart people that want to work hard and make a difference.
And it's easy access.
Totally.
Because some people I work with might want to go into transition to something else. You just can't knock on the door of, a lot of big corporations, but you are encouraged to get involved in government.
Absolutely, and I'm at a different subway stop in the district
Right.
every Friday
I
morning. So
know.
come say hi or give a call into the office. If I'm your assembly member, would love to talk. If you need connections to your assembly member, you live elsewhere, happy to do that as well.
Well, that's one thing I want to say. You are incredibly responsive, and
Thank you.
you walk the talk. So that's something that I was going to end with, but we have a few minutes. It was so appropriate right now.
Thank you.
So where do you see, what do you see in the future for yourself, like to get more involved in? What's your future look like?
Well, I'm very much enjoying my job right now, and I've found in my career so far that if you focus on doing a good job and what you're doing, the rest tends to take care of itself. So I'm trying to find the places where I think I can have the biggest impact, and places that are, New Yorkers are really feeling the stress. And so I'm looking at more of what we can do around AI. I'm really focused on housing and how we can have more affordable housing and so people can settle here and build their families. And I always just want to make sure that government's working for people and that they walk away from every interaction with my office with a little more belief in government than they had before.
Well, that is a nice thing to be able to say. And I think people do when they get to know you and they see your commitment and your passion and the hard work. I mean, there's a lot of hard work that comes with this.
There is a lot of hard work.
A lot of long hours, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, is there anything that you weren't able to say that you'd like to say today?
I really appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation with you, and you've done a wonderful job highlighting people from so many different backgrounds on this channel. I really just want to end with the note of, if you're interested in government, if you're interested in helping your community, there's so many ways to get involved. You can start with my office, you can go to any other office, but I think we need a lot more of people taking ownership of their neighborhood, of their community, of finding ways to make things better, whether or not it's full-time, right? It doesn't need to be that, but there's so many opportunities to get involved. Please do.
Thank you. I couldn't think of a perfect ending. Engage, get involved.
Absolutely.
Alex, thank you so much. I knew this would be good, but it was great. So thank you.
Thank you.